Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our FY22 grant application process, our Human Service Nonprofit grant application. So the purpose of our Human Service Nonprofit grant application is to strengthen the county's coordination with our nonprofit partners and collaborators to ensure local funds are leveraged in the most effective manner that provides services to the most vulnerable in our county that meet the need for safety, health, security, and independence with those most vulnerable. Let's see, here we go. The FY22 process has 4 priority areas, and these areas are the same as we've had in the last couple years. The 4 areas are prevention and self-sufficiency, crisis intervention and diversion, long-term support, and improved quality of human services. And just briefly, the prevention and self-sufficiency focuses on services that assist individuals and families in becoming and or remaining independent and stable, and providing tools, skills, and strategies and resources to individuals and families. The crisis intervention and diversion. This priority area focuses on services provided to individuals and families in crisis to overcome immediate problems and reduce or prevent further penetration to more restrictive and expansive higher level services. Our long-term support priority area are services that focus on assisting individuals who have continuing long-term support needs to remain healthy, safe, and independent in the community. And the 4th, improved quality of human services, are those services and opportunities provided to individuals, organizations, and communities that enhance the quality, accessibility, and accountability and coordination of services provided by community organizations. Now, in the application process, you're able to pick one or multiple priority areas. We ask if you that you focus on your largest priority area. However, if there is something that falls into another area, that you choose that as well. So you can pick multiple priority areas. As in the past, we have 2 funding options. We have our standard nonprofit application, which is a competitive, more in-depth application process, which also requires higher accountability as far as reporting is concerned. And those applications are for grants of $5,000 and one to $113,000. We have the cutoff at $113,000, similarly to what we had last year. And we're hoping, we'll see in the next slide, the rate in which we've had applications and those in which we can apply. So we hope that keeping it at that $113,000, that we will be able to fund a larger pool of grantees this year. The second funding option is our mini grants process, which is a simplified application process, and it's for any organization applying for a grant of $5,000 or less. It has fewer questions with greater emphasis on program elements, and it's just, like I mentioned, a simplified application process. Who should apply for mini grants? Organizations with a small program or limited need, organizations that lack the capacity to complete a full application, and also the capacity to be able to fulfill the required reporting requirements, and organizations new to grants and wanting to gain experience. So as mentioned previously, here are 3 years of history for our nonprofit human service grant application. From 2019 to, I guess 2018, I guess those dates are wrong. Oh no, that's right, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So you've seen where we've had a our number of grants that have applied has grown, and we've tried to keep track with that. but we're limited with our funding pool. So as I mentioned, this year we hope that we can fund more applicants. Here's our grant process timeline. The application process the application release date was on Monday, November 16th. Today we're having our informational session. Questions, deadline to submit any questions will be December 11th, and those questions will be submitted through the nonprofit email address. And then the application deadline is December 21st at 4:00 p.m. And then just quickly, the application review will happen between January and February of 2021. The recommendations will be presented to the Board of Supervisors in their second meeting in April. Shortly thereafter, awards will be announced, and then we begin the process. MOUs will be signed, and then the fiscal year date is January 1st. The FY22 eligibility criteria, again, similar to last year's, be a nonprofit, a 501c3, have a mission that's consistent with serving the county's areas of need that we talked about previously, and be in good standing with the Virginia SCC. And also, in addition to that, the county values partnerships and high quality service using evidence-based programs and best practices, and those organizations that have a strong past performance. In addition, this is a new criteria that is part of our FY22 process, that the Virginia law, and we learned this through the county attorney's office as we were implementing our CARES Act grants, that the Virginia law prohibits localities from supporting public or appropriating public funds to organizations controlled in whole or in part by churches. So this is a new criteria this year, and the way that we'll be looking at this is through, we're asking you to submit information on not only staff, but your board of directors. So we'll be taking a closer look at your board of directors structure to ensure that you're meeting this eligibility criteria. As mentioned earlier, individual boards will be limited to no more than $113,000, and funds requested should align with the county's imperative of investing in high quality human services that meets the needs of our residents. A few changes to this year's application process. Organizations who receive funding through this opportunity will be required to set up an automated clearinghouse account with the county. There will no longer be paper checks issued by the county. Our hope is that this will streamline the payment process to be quicker, easier, and not be so dependent on our mail service. And then, as mentioned, the eligibility criteria for faith-based organizations. This year, if you refer to page 13 on your RFA, we have streamlined the scoring process a little bit differently this year, where each section of the application is assigned a point value that adds up to 100 points or 100%. So you'll see as we go through this that questions are assigned a point value and that each section has a percentage in which it's worth. Also within this, I will state that last year there were several objectives that were part of the scoring criteria. These objectives have remained the same. We've just kind of packaged it a little bit differently, as you'll see as we go through the application process. Much of the questions are the same. It just looks a little bit different and packaged a little bit differently as well.
And Barb,
Here is where, Yes.
Can we pause for a quick question? We do have one question in the chat. Is the cap
Absolutely.
funding, so we know that the cap for funding is $113,000. So is the cap also still 30% of operating expenses for the organization?
Yes, it is. Yes, thank you for the question. That's a great question. Yes, the cap is 30% of the organization's operating budget.
Okay.
And that is stated within the RFA. So moving on, this is where you can find the application materials on the county's website. So you just www.loudoun.gov/nonprofit grants. So in the competitive application process, all the questions are required to be answered. And for the mini grant questions, if you halfway down on the cover page of the application, you must choose between the full grant or the mini grant. If you choose the mini grant, it will bring you automatically to the simplified or the shorter version of the application process. If there is indeed a question that you're not able to answer or you don't have the answer to, you can enter not applicable or NA. Otherwise, it will stop you and make you put something in there, so that NA will suffice for that piece. So make sure you pick full grant or mini grant. So the application sections that you will see, and let me see if I can pull up real quick the Laserfish form. Here is the top of the form. You will see there'll be a cover form that just has all of the critical organization name, tax ID, mailing address, just all of the organization's information is in the cover form. We have the grant application. It starts with a statement of need. The statement of need, I'm going to move back to my slide. The statement of need is worth 25 points. We'll go through each of these sections separately. We have the project description and timeline, which is worth 20 points. Organizational background, qualifications and expertise, which is 15 points. Evaluation and sustainability will be worth 15 points. And then your budget and your supporting financial documents is 25 points. And throughout all of your writing of your application, throughout each of the sections, we hope that you build, when you start with your statement of need, which is really the heart of your application, we hope that you will build on the statement of need with your project description, and then tell us about your organization, and keep building on your application as you build your story of your organization's service. So starting with the statement of need, again, this is worth 25 points. The purpose is we ask that you present the facts and the anecdotes that support the needs for the project or the program that you're asking funding for. Need statement questions should be answered based on the problem your services are seeking to solve, and be specific about the problem and need. And the required questions begin on page 9 of the RFA. And again, the purpose of the needs is to present both facts and stories to support the needs of your program. And as mentioned, it really is the heart of your program and where you kind of start to build that story. The need statement should define why the problem is both important to the applicant and of interest to the county. Compelling needs make for compelling projects which are worthy of funding. This year we have part of the needs statement, we're asking organizations to complete a demographic information table. And here it is here. We're asking people to complete this for FY 18, 19, and 20 to give us some historical information. We're asking for unduplicated clients that you're, Loudoun County residents that you're serving. unduplicated clients within that specified service area that you're asking for funding. And then we're asking for specific demographic information as it relates to age, race, ethnicity, gender, and then we're also asking to just try to get some more information in regards to where do our residents live that are seeking your services. This is new. We've asked for some of this information, not necessarily in this format in previous years. So we're asking you to complete this table with as much information as your organization is able to provide. You will not be scored negatively if you're not able to complete all of the information, but also note that this is the direction in which the county is going towards and seeking this information. So as you look to complete this information this year, also look for opportunities and ways in which you can capture this information moving forward.
And Barb, we have a few questions coming in. Can we go ahead and pause here?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
the question that we have is related to the application for the organization. So if an organization wants to apply for more than one project, would they submit 2 separate applications? If so, is the cap for both applications 113 combined, or is the cap separate for each project?
That's a great question. Megan, if you can help on this as well. I will say that the cap will remain at 113. I don't know if the county has allowed 2 separate applications in the past.
No.
Per organization?
Yeah, so per organization, we expect 1 application. If your organization has multiple programs that you expect the funding to be used for, or for instance, you are looking at operating expenses, so you're using it across the board, you would still only provide 1 application, but you will need to think about the outcomes and the evaluation for what you're requesting. So what, if you're looking at organization-wide, what are the needs for, you know, most of your programs, for the majority of your programs and services that you're providing? But it would be 1 application for multiple programs.
Thank you.
Another question we have is, what is unduplicated count?
An unduplicated count is if Barb comes to your organization for I don't know what for X service, and I come on a monthly basis. So Barb's come 1 individual, she's come 12 times. So an unduplicated client count would be 1. So it wouldn't be 12, it would just be that 1 time that you would count me as an unduplicated client.
All right, for the demographic table, what if we do not have this information for all the people in the household? Can you take estimates or percentages?
Estimates and percentages would be great. What information that you can provide us would be helpful. If it's just for that 1 household that you have the demographic information for, but you have 5 people within that household, you would count those 5 people as unduplicated clients, but you might have demographic information on only 1 of them. If you state that, if you let us know the breakdown of your data, that would just help us look at it in a clear fashion.
And for the specific demographic data, do the organizations need to provide the breakdown for the project or for Loudoun residents served?
Great question. Here is we're asked. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I can quickly answer that one. So if you are requesting funds for just one service, let's say you have a new teen help program that you want to kind of get started and get on board, and that's what you're going to use your funds for. You would need to provide demographic information for that project. However, if you are using the funds for an established service or as for operating expenses, we would expect all Loudoun residents served if you're going to be using that across projects. So it really does depend on the project or on the program that you would be requesting funding for. And that's the information that we would want in that demographic table. Another question that's come in is, if we're unable to complete the full demographic table, should we address why in the narrative section?
Absolutely. Please give us as much information or detail as to why you're not able to do that. That would be very helpful.
Okay. Another question is, will applications be weighted based on how many Loudoun residents are currently served?
No.
And the last question for this section, on the demographic information table, what is the definition of number of instances provided?
So those would be the number of services that you provided. So using the example prior, Barb came in, I'm one unduplicated client, but Barb had 12 services. So those would be the encounters that you had, number of encounters that you had with your that one client.
And we have one last question. Are organizations based outside of Loudoun County eligible for consideration, presuming they serve Loudoun County residents?
Yes, as long as you're serving Loudoun County residents, organizations that are housed outside the county can apply.
All right. That's all for now.
Okay, moving on, the next section within the application is our project description and timeline, which is weighted at 20 points. So once you've identified the need for services in the previous section, describe the service or program for which your organization is applying for funds. We ask you to focus on the solution to the need you've identified in that need statement. You can find the required questions. We'll begin on page 9 of the RFA, and then the criteria for this section on page 13 and 14. One of the things that we're also asking you to do in this section is not only talk about your proposed solution to the need, but if you're using any type of evidence-based programs, any service approach, that you also indicate what those are and explain what those evidence-based programs are. And with that, a little bit more about those evidence-based programs. And again, this is an area that the county is moving in this direction, is asking organizations to really focus and use evidence-based programs. So in evidence, your program description should include any research on effectiveness of your approach. There's many federal, private organizations that rank effectiveness of approaches that you can utilize and implement within your programs. And we ask that your organization, when talking about your evidence-based programs, to outline how you demonstrate your outcomes. And later we'll talk about evaluation and outcomes. But if you are indeed referencing or using or implementing an evidence-based program, please describe that and show us how you're using that. The third section is our organizational background, qualifications, and expertise, which is weighted at 15 points. And again, this section is building on the previous two sections. but it tells us how your organization has the capacity to carry out the project that you're proposing to be granted for funds. This section should include your organization's knowledge and expertise, not only within the staff, but with your board to carry out your proposed services. Again, the required questions can be found on page 9 and 10 of the RFA. And this year, I know in the past within the application process, we've asked you to kind of complete a board table within the application. This year, we're asking you to upload and save and download this organization and staff, or staff and board list. So on the top part of the spreadsheet, we're asking you to list any staff that are critical to your project or to your organization, those that are going to be part of carrying out your project. So their name, their race, the position within the organization, your management experience, your years of experience within that management experience, and then any additional information that you feel free to want to share with us. We're also asking you to provide us with numbers, number of your full-time staff, part-time staff, volunteers, board members, and then the number of times your board members meet each year. In addition to that, and you'll notice on these, there's drop downs that you can pick from, and the same with management experience. Should you have multiple management experiences or competencies, we're asking you just to explain that in the additional information. Similarly, scroll down, we're asking for the similar board information. Again, name, race, position, profession, or title, their employer. Again, your management competency or your expertise. The number of years, we're asking if there's any relationship to any paid staff within your organization, and again, additional information. So the setup is a little bit different this year. We hope that you'll find the use of this a little bit easier. We're also hoping it'll be a little bit easier for our reviewers. So that's the organization, background, qualifications, and expertise.
And Barb, shall we pause here for more questions?
Of course.
Right. So one question is, can you expand on the evidence-based remarks? If the project uses more than one evidence-based approach, do we outline both? And what links are acceptable? I can answer if you want me to.
Go.
So if your project uses more than one evidence-based approach, and you know where to find those, whether it be a national organization's clearinghouse, or there are so many clearinghouses that either the federal government has, the Department of Justice, Health and Human Services, the mental health associations, all have evidence-based approaches with links and the level of evidence. Please outline both evidence-based approaches. Just briefly, it doesn't have to be a thesis on the approach itself, but we would like to know what the studies are that reference it as evidence-based. So for instance, if you're looking at a supplemental educational program for reading, for instance, What Works Clearinghouse is a really good tool to go on and find which programs are evidence-based. SAMHSA also has them for mental health. The Department of Justice partners with organizations to vet evidence-based practices and programs through their website as well. So it really will depend on what your area of expertise or your evidence is. But any of the links that would come from a reputable organization would be okay. And then also we have another question about the faith-based community. is it okay that a local farmer and food pantry is run by a faith-based group to distribute food?
Again, as long as they're a 501c3 organization, and I can go back to the one slide here that talks about as long as they're not controlled in whole or part by a church or other house of worship, as long as it meets those eligibility criteria, yes, that would qualify.
Thank you. That's all we have for now.
Okay, and I think, Megan, we turn it over to you to talk about our evaluation and sustainability.
Sure, thanks. So with your evaluation and sustainability plan, when you look on page 10 of the RFA, essentially what we're looking for is a continuation of your story. So you've talked through the previous 3 sections about the need, the population that you're serving, the project or services that you're providing to that population, some expected achievements that you would anticipate happening through your year of funding. And so what the evaluation and sustainability section really focuses on is how you're going to measure those. How can you capture the accomplishments of your service or your project in a way that is uniform, standard, and able to be quantified. So the criteria per question actually are starting on page 14. We've tried to simplify the process a bit for you. For those of you who applied last year, there was some confusion with the questions in the evaluation plan. We've actually made this a simpler process that aligns with what's in the manual this year. So I'm going to have Barb pull up the outcome and evaluation plan table. So this is actually in the application this year. It is embedded into the application. So you have this available for download, and we expect you to complete the outcomes and evaluation section and then re-upload it into the application itself. So what it goes through is just a little bit of the instructions. So really what we want you to think through is in your story, related to your organization's mission, your purpose, and your context and conditions that that your organization operates under. What is a feasible activity or services that you provide and help residents with? So we need to be thinking about how we want to count that. You can scroll down just a little bit, Barb. Keep going. There we go. So when we get to the logic models, this is a full logic model intended for use for all organizations. It's hard to see all of it within this picture, but essentially what we're looking for is for the area of need that you've chosen for your application, we want you to complete that area in the logic model. So you do not have to complete every box in this logic model. So let's say, for instance, we will talk about a prevention program. Let's say you want to prevent teen vaping in low-income areas. So you would choose the lighter green prevention box and walk through the logic model itself. And really the logic model is just a visual representation of what you probably have in your strategic plan or in your organization's strategic map or processes already. So really what we're looking for is a metric that can be used to help identify this in a visual way and a representation that we can then provide to the Board of Supervisors. So when you're looking at a prevention program for vaping for teens, your inputs really are those organizational staff, your resources. If you have any other grant funds that go into this program, that go into this service, we want to see those here. It can be a short bulleted list, but let's say you've assigned 3 staff to this anti-vaping prevention program, and you've received a $25,000 grant for seed money, and you also have an additional federal grant that's for $100,000. So that would be in your input section. The services covered by grant funds would be what you've described in your project description in your section B. So again, bullet points on what services you expect to cover in this grant. So if it's operating expenses, you'll need to think about how you want to pare those down a little bit to be able to kind of have that bulleted list. But again, it's those activities that you'll actually be going through and working on in the year that you have the grant funds. So for instance, with a vaping prevention program, the activities would be conducting outreach to high schools, conducting outreach in low-income housing areas, partnering with churches, and conducting maybe anti-vaping or educational programming related to the negative effects of vaping. So those would be the services that you're going to provide as part of this grant. Then the outputs really are the evidence that those activities were completed. Okay, so this is really kind of the bean counting of the logic model itself. So with the outreach, how many people did you reach? How many people did you actually touch? How many people did you have interactions with? Did you provide them with any resources, pamphlets, websites? What was the number of those? What evidence do you have that your activities went on as planned? You had a training or an educational activity with teens and 100 people showed up. That would be an output, a number that actually shows that things went on as planned. So those would be entered into the required outputs column. So you would just replace the text that is here in the Word document with your own bullet points. We've provided some small examples here just to kind of give you a sense of what we're looking for. So once you have your outputs that tell you, that will tell us that the activities did go on as planned, the next step of that logic model is measuring the outcomes. So what will tell us the effects, the consequences, the impact that your service has had on this population? Okay, so what we're looking for is, statements that start with increase or decrease. So we want to see some sort of directionality in your outcomes. It could be a maintain if you know that there's a huge increase in teens vaping, let's say. You want to decrease that trend or help maintain, 0 increases, something like that. But essentially what we're looking for are broad statements that show that there has been some change in the population that you're serving, some positive change that we can reflect in data. All right. So with that, again, if you have multiple programs or you're using this for operating expenses, you may want to think about which areas of need you want to plug into this logic model. We're not requiring all of them. It's only for the areas of need for which you've identified at the beginning of the application. All right. And so can we scroll down just a little bit, Barb? All right. So once you've completed the logic model above, again, it's only for the project and programs and services for which you're requesting funds. If you have a couple of areas checked, then you'll want to kind of spread the outputs out throughout those areas. Now what we want you to do is, because these outcomes are at the 10,000 foot level in a logic model, now we need you to think about how to operationalize those. How do we actually measure them and set targets? So what you'll do for this next section is give us quarterly targets that you plan on hitting as a result of your year of funding. So you would simply copy and paste the service and the outputs and outcomes from above. You would give us the data sources that you are planning on using. So for instance, if we stick with the vaping prevention program, you could have the number of teens in attendance. You could also have evaluation surveys. You could have the number of teens who've self-reported stopping vaping, or whatever data source you have that will help you demonstrate that your outcome is being met. That's what we're looking for there. Then you will set your Q1 target. How many? And in what way? So if you're looking to decrease vaping by 50% in teen populations in Southwest Leesburg, let's say, then you would set that Q1 target at something reasonable for your project, because the 50% would be over the entire year. So you may say, well, because it's a new program, we're starting up, we expect a slow start. So maybe it's only 10% in Q1 that you would anticipate as a target. Mid-year, you're up to 25. Then maybe 40% by Q3. And by the end of the year, you would expect to hit that 50% decrease. So that is what we are expecting here in this table. So again, be reasonable with the expectations. We know that change takes time. And we understand that, the outcomes will be broad if you are looking at operating expenses. So with that, can you scroll down a little bit more, Barb? I think that might be
Sure.
There are a couple of examples that we have that can help you. Yeah. So there are also just examples in the Word document itself to help you, so you don't have to come back and reference this training as well. All right. And with that, I'm going to look to the chat to see if there are any questions. And let's see here. Okay. So I think we answered this question, but I do want the group to make sure that we understand. Do we need a logic model for each program for which we request funding, or a combined logic model? So if you are asking for operating expenses, again, what you'll want to think about is the programs or the services that are kind of the overarching programs and services that would define your program, that would define your organization, and focus on those outcomes. That could be something in your organization's strategic plan already that you could use. But you would have a logic model for each of the services if they are across the areas of need. So you'll just have to pay attention to those areas of need. The next question is a logic model required for mini grant applications? And also, are staff and board qualifications and expertise required for mini grant applications? We do have a significantly pared down version of the application process for mini grant applications. We do expect an evaluation plan for the mini grants because we do want to see how you proceed over time with the funding. We don't expect the level of detail with the mini grants because the funds are smaller. So we can talk to you a little bit more about the specific requirements for mini grants, but it is significantly pared down compared to the standard grant itself. Let's see. One more question. If funding would support multiple projects, then it would be a request for operational funds, which can only be 30% of your expenses. That is correct. So if you are looking for a larger, something that's operating funds, you would still need to complete the evaluation plan, and it would need to be 30% of your expenses or less. And the last one we have, do the mini grant applications need to submit quarterly targets or only end of year targets? And that is a good question, and I am blanking on the response. I apologize. Barb, do you happen to know if it's just end of year or is it quarterly?
The mini grants, the only requirement is end of the year.
All right, great. So the other piece of the evaluation and sustainability section in is kind of new for this year. These are questions that were asked last year as well, and we've put them into a table for download so that you can easily use them. Again, we are looking for past performance. Past performance is the top indicator of future performance. So we will be expecting to see grants or contracts for three types or three grants contracts for which your organization has received funds in the past, as well as a contact name and information that we can follow up with those contacts. Just to ask very simple questions. Did the organization actually do what they said they were going to do with this grant? Very simple questions. It's not a long process, but we do just want to make sure that we are taking past performance into consideration. And the second piece of this is also how you're operating with your other partners. Do you have formal MOUs? Do you have existing partnerships that are formalized in some way? We would like to know about those so that we can better understand the context in which you operate and what your important relationships are with other organizations. That helps us put context and start to kind of weave together the tapestry of the complex relationships for our nonprofits. That really helps us understand the environment. And so I'm going to pause there for a second. We have one more question. Should the grants, contracts, MOUs be relevant to the project or the agency in general? That's a good question. Again, it's up to you as the organization to determine which ones you would want to include, but certainly it needs to be related to the request. So if your organization, let's say you're starting a new project and you know that your parent organization that may be a national affiliate or something is actually going to be working on the fiscal side, and you also have formal MOUs at the national level that you enact at the local level, that's fine. It could be anything that works to help us understand that you are demonstrating your relationships and your contracts, and that it's really about making sure that the capacity is there to complete your grant and your activities as planned. And it looks like we have a couple of other questions. Can a newer organization apply if they have a fiscal agent? The short answer is yes. How you set up your financial documentation is going to be helped with, with having a fiscal agent who can help with the responsibilities of the financial side. And last, do you just have to give descriptions of the MOUs, or do you have to attach the actual MOUs as well? For this year, and Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, we are not asking that you attach the full MOU. Is that correct? We are asking for the
That
description.
is not correct.
Okay.
That is not correct. We are asking, I can pull it up real quick.
Okay.
We are asking for, under the evaluation and sustainability, we are asking for, oh, I picked the wrong one. Let me go back. We're under the mini grant. We are asking for organizations to, but that's a strategic plan, to, oh, here we go, upload MOU, MOA, just the front pages if applicable. So we are asking you to do that.
All right, and it doesn't look like we have additional questions, so I think we can continue.
Okay.
All right.
So here's continuation.
Yes. Yeah, I think we can, we can continue to talk about why we evaluate programs, but I think given who we have in the audience, many of you are aware that really evaluation does help to support data-driven improvements and support movements or improvements that really do help the residents. It also helps to track your progress and track the effectiveness and the efficacy of your work. So are your intended results actually bearing out? We really do focus on results and are working towards a more results-based application process. So that is something that we will continue to move towards as we get further into this process, and hopefully in the future this will become second nature. The evaluation piece of this, the logic model, Barb, you can go to the next slide. The logic model piece of this and the evaluation plan can be used for other grant opportunities as well. This isn't just confined to one Loudoun County grant. The evaluation plan and outcomes can be used in multiple ways. As I mentioned, strategic planning as one, but also if you're looking for other external funding opportunities, this would be a way to help demonstrate your keen evaluation status that you have with other funders. So this is something that you can use and reuse over time. And then the last one is just some examples of outcome measures. And again, looking at the type of data that you'll be expected to collect and the type of data and processes that you have. So we are looking for numbers, we're looking for percentages, we are looking for those hard data, the metrics that will help tell your story. This is really helpful to us in knowing that you're meeting your goals and targets, but also it's helpful to the Board of Supervisors and to the public to understand how successful the nonprofits are in our area. So we do aggregate these data and look at them across time to really show how much we've been able to support residents and how much you've been able to do as organizations in supporting county residents. And yes, you do hear a strange noise, Alexa. That is my dog. And she is sitting in the background. She thinks it's a show today. So I apologize. I am going to put myself on mute now, and you shouldn't hear it anymore. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Megan. We will move into the final part of our application process, which is the budget and the supporting financial documentation. You'll notice that we started with our needs assessment, our needs statement, which was 25 points, and we're ending with our budget and supporting financial information, which is also 25 points. So we've kind of weighted those, showing that these are two of the key important pieces of the application process, not to take away what's in the middle of these two, because that also builds on your story. But your budget also tells a story about your project or your organization. So based on your organization's outputs and outcomes, we ask you to complete a realistic budget. And this year we're asking you to complete a budget template that will be provided as an upload in the actual application. And once we're through with this piece of it, I'll quickly walk you through the Laserfish form so you can see what this looks like. So here's a budget template. We have it broken down by different sections with personnel and employees. We're asking for the name, the position title, their annual salary rate, the percent of the FTE. And once you put in your annual salary rate and the percent FTE, it will calculate to a total. And then from there, we're asking for a percent of fringe. So here we're asking that I can't see my cell. We have these cells broken down. We're asking that if your fringe percent is 22%, that you make sure that you calculate that in the cell, and I can't seem to pull that bar back up. But there is a cell there, so make sure you put in that percentage and it'll automatically calculate to your total salary and fringe. And then all these cells calculate within each of the categories in which you're asking for funds for. I just saw a fringe question pop up. Your fringe, percent fringe, are those dollar amounts that pay for a staff person's health insurance, it could be their retirement, any of those added benefits that the organization pays for on behalf of the individual that's not part of their annual salary. So within each section, and we'll scroll through, we're asking for a justification. So in this section, give us a little narrative of the importance of these staff members and these key people and how they're going to be a significant part of your program, your organization, your project. How are they going to positively impact your program? So a brief narrative piece there. We have a section on contractual and consultants. So we're asking for a name or an agency. What are they doing? And this kind of flows down into your justification as well. What are you paying them? And it could be a unit cost per hour. It could be a total sum, whatever that might be. If it's a unit cost of per hour, then how many hours are we going to pay them for? So again, a brief description of what that's for. If you're asking for the county to contribute to any of your occupancy costs, we're asking for a description of what that is. What is it? Some organizations do it by square feet. Some of it do it on a monthly basis and do a percentage per monthly basis. So tell us what that looks like. If indeed you're asking for occupancy support. Travel and transportation. This would be for travel and transportation for staff who might be having to travel throughout the county to provide any services. It could also be for any meetings that you might be attending. So what does that transportation look like? So a brief description here. The current federal reimbursement rate is 57.5 cents. So we have that automatically calculated for you for that section. Supplies. What are supplies that you need to fulfill your project requirements? It could be anything from paper, pencils. What are those supplies that you need? It could be even food supplies that you need to distribute your food. Give us a description of what those are per unit costs and the numbers. If you're asking for any equipment support, what equipment might that be? And tell us the cost. Tell us how this equipment is going to impact or benefit the program for the funds in which you're asking for funding. This section, direct client costs. It could be if you're providing transportation to a client to get to a dental appointment. It could be if you're supplying gift cards or food cards to a client. Give us a description. So anything that's directly related to a client, we're asking you to put those costs in this section. Again, with a brief justification or a narrative in explaining what those are. Communication costs, these could be costs around marketing materials. How are you getting the word out about the services that you're providing? How are you marketing those services? So any costs around communication, it could be around social media. What are those costs? Other direct costs are costs that we haven't captured in the above categories. It could be any additional supplies that we may not have captured. It could be, let me go here. Here on the second section, we have kind of greater descriptions on what is a consultant, what is a contractual. Under occupancy, it could be rate, rent and utilities. Again, travel and transportation, reimbursement for staff use, per miles, supplies, anything that you need to administer your program. Again, regarding equipment, long-term equipment purchases that exceed $5,000. Any of those purchases, please contact us for prior approval. Again, those tokens, fare cards, any incentives that you have under those client costs. Here are your communications, in addition to some marketing, telephone costs, cell phone costs, internet, and then the direct other costs are those materials for meetings, anything in addition to what we haven't been able to capture in the sections above. So this part of your budget gives a little more greater description of what we're asking for in the actual budget template.
And Barb, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
The first is related to the personnel budget, and it is the FTE, is the percent FTE meant to show how much time the employee is working on duties for which we are asking for funding?
Yes. Yes. So you might have a specific project that employee is dedicating 25% of their time. So we're only asking you to show us that 25% of time.
All right. Another question is, where would we put things like insurance, software, and utility costs?
Utility costs can go under your occupancy costs in this section, and the other costs, I would suggest that you put them under the other direct costs.
Okay. And one other question from an equine therapy provider. The therapy horses are certainly a direct cost to the provision of their mental health services. Any guidance on where they could account for the therapy horse expenses?
That's a great question. You could
So I think I might have a solution for that.
Okay.
If we're thinking about the equine expenses such as food or the shelter, the bedding, things like that would go under other direct expenses.
Yes.
And anything that is supplies, so for instance, they may need a new harness or a new bridle or something that is related to the supplies that they would need to actually provide the therapy, that would go under your supplies. If there are larger pieces of equipment that would be needed, maybe to shelter the horses, that would go under equipment, things like that. So I think we would consider, supplies for the horses in the same way that we would consider supplies for the offices as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will pull up the application just to show you. We're asking organizations to complete, if you've received any COVID-19, any additional COVID-19 funds, that we're asking you to complete this section. So if you've received multiple, just click which ones you have. If you've received something that's not on this list, click other, and then just let us know what that other is. And in addition to the budget that we're asking you to complete for your proposed project, we're also asking you to submit financial documents. So your most recent audit, your last 3 years of financial statements, your current operating budget, your last 3 years of your 990, your IRS letter of determination stating that you're a 501c3 organization, and then a certificate of good standing from the Virginia SCC. And there's a link in which you can get, if you don't have a current good standing certificate with the Virginia SCC, we provided a link in which you can get it. And there is a fee to get the actual certification. If you're not able or willing to pay for that fee, is all we're asking you to take a screenshot of what you see when you file for that, and that will be sufficient for fulfilling this requirement. Lastly, or kind of getting to the end, and like I said, I will go through the Laserfish application just so you can kind of see it. The review process, they'll be reviewed by a team of county staff from various departments within the county. Funding recommendations will be based on available funding, the application score, the number of requests that we've received, and then the reasonability of proposed budget items and cost for services. Before we go here, let me pull up the Laserfish application.
And Barb,
we'll start.
Pause for a quick second. We do have some budget related questions that also come in. So one question was related to volunteers and the budget. So if a person is working with or on staff in an organization but volunteers their time, do they include that in the budget?
No, we're just asking for you to include staff that are part of the project or part of the budget in which you're asking for funds for. Within the staff and board list, we do ask for the number of volunteers on the right-hand side of the spreadsheet. So we do ask for that there, but within your budget, we're only asking for budgeted items.
Okay. All right. Another question we have is, are we just to include in the budget form the expenses we plan to use the county funds to pay for, or the budget for our project?
Oh. The budget should be what you're asking for. So if you're asking the county for $113,000, your budget should equal the $113,000 and what's included in that dollar amount.
Correct. So even if the whole project costs $300,000, we only need the expenses, the budget for the $113,000.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. All right, and another couple of questions, but these are related to the Laserfish form and the COVID section.
Okay. Okay. I can
First
go
is
quickly.
for the COVID section. I believe it asks to say what the funds are used for and how much you got. Where do we put that information?
That's a great, so thank you. That's an oversight on our part. Thank you for pointing that out. If you're able, there's no text limitation in other. If you could give us a brief description in other, that would satisfy that requirement. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yep, and the last question is, there's a Field CARES Act from a town, but not one for the Loudoun County grants. Where would they put the Loudoun County CARES Act grants?
Put that in other.
And then one last question related to the budget and required documents. Will the organization lose points for not submitting a recent audit?
Megan, I'll defer to you on that one.
Yeah, so all of the required documents in the finance section do have points attached to them. We do need to see the most recent audit. If you don't have one, you will lose some points, but you won't lose the full amount of points for that question or for that section. So you would have partial points assigned without the most recent audit.
And also, we would also, if you're not able to provide that, if in this section in optional, if you could tell us why you don't have your most recent audit.
And another question is back to the COVID funding. Should we list only funding we received to support Loudoun residents or regionally, if applicable?
We're only looking for Loudoun residents. Okay. I will briefly go through the Laserfish form, just so you have a general sense of what it is. As mentioned earlier, we have our cover form that just asks for basic organizational information, the number of years you've been established, mailing addresses, contact information. Here, back to one question, we're asking for your 2020 operating budget, so your total organization budget. Here, back to the budget question, you might have a project that costs $300,000. So you would put that total amount here, and then the amount that you're requesting from the county would be that 113 or the 80, whatever it might be. So here, this is where we're looking to see what that total project costs and then what you're asking from the county. This disregard as far as that's concerned. So we're asking for your fiscal year start date and end date, a brief overview of your request, and then again, the mini grant, first time applicant, and then we're asking for what are the areas of need that you're requesting funding for. So I'm going to move forward with the full application. One of the things that you'll notice this year, last year, and I believe prior years, we had a character or word suggestion. This year, we're putting word limits as a guide. Within the text sections, there is no stopgap that you will encounter, but we're just asking for you to try to limit your word count to what we have suggested. starting with the grant application and the statement of need. I believe there's 4 questions associated with this. So we're just asking you to, in each text box, to answer each of the questions. And again, you'll see the value of each question, and then again, the word limit that we're suggesting. And again, here's a link.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I will just point out that all questions are marked as required. And so if you're unable to answer the question, but still would like to submit your application, you would need to write in a justification on why you're unable to answer the question, because all application questions are required. We will not be reviewing any incomplete applications.
Thank you. So here, I'll just show an example. We're asking you to save your document frequently. You'll find the save button here. Once you press the save, you'll be asked, oh, so mine's not working. It goes back to that. I have a little glitch in mine. You should not see this in yours, just so you're aware of that. We're asking you to save frequently. When you do hit the Save As Draft button, you'll be a screen will pop up that will ask for a username and a password, and this will allow you to get back into the document at a later date. So we're asking you to do that frequently. But here, an example, so save your application. When you go to the links, you'll click open the link. It'll show up here. We're asking you to open it, and then asking you to save the document as your organization name and then what the table is. So you would do a save as to your computer with your organization name and then demographic table. Save it to your computer, and once you have it saved, you'll have the upload button here where you'll be able to go and upload the document to where you have saved it on your computer. So that's how all of the links work. The next section, the project description and timeline, again, 20 points. This is the largest section that we're asking for. It's a 1,000-word limit. It's 8 points. So that's the largest or the most weighted question that we have. Again, save. You can always go back to the previous section or click the next button, and you'll come to the organization, qualifications, and experience. Again, your organization capacity. Here we have another link. Again, save, upload your link, save it with your organization name, and then the upload button. The evaluation and sustainability, 15 points. Again, the link to the outcome table. Here we're asking organizations to also upload your most recent strategic plan. This is something that the mini grants does not have to submit, but we're asking you to, the other organizations who are submitting a full application to submit a strategic plan. And then again, the grants contracts MOU table. And here, as we talked about previously, a place where you can upload at least the front pages of your MOU and MOAs. And then the budget and supporting documentation is here. And then again, it's the same upload function as you have. It'll get you to where you have these documents saved on your computer. So we'll just go to where those are at for each one of those. You do have the capacity to upload multiple documents in each of these. And then if there's any other additional attachments that you want to upload that you feel might be helpful to the reviewers. You can upload them here, but please note that reviewers won't open any additional documents unless they're referenced someplace in the narrative. Lastly is where we just have you put your authorizing official's email address here, and then you hit submit or save as a draft. So before you submit, just make sure that all your documents are uploaded, all your narrative pieces, all your text information is complete. And that's the Laserfiche form. I will go quickly over the mini grant application, which is much simpler. So if you just hit yes there and hit next, it'll bring you to each of the sections. So the statement of need, we're just asking you to complete the main question about what your program addresses. In the project description and timeline, again, it's just that one question that talks about what is your solution to the problem or your need that you've identified. And again, we're asking you to reference any evidence-based activities or strategies that you have implemented. On the organizational background and qualifications, what are your current activities? What currently is your board member initiatives? Are you working on the strategic plan? What are your recent accomplishments within the past 3 years or within the last, if you're a newer organization, just your most recent accomplishments? The evaluation of sustainability, we're asking you to complete and upload the outcome and evaluation plan. And then the budget and supporting documentation, the budget, any CARES Act funds, and again, all of the uploads. The only one for the mini grants that we're asking for as far as your 990 is your most recent 990. All other documentation is required. And again, you just hit the save as draft or the submit. So that's a quick overview and a quick look at what the Laserfiche application looks like.
All right. And Barb, can we have a few questions in the chat.
Sure.
The first is we can request general funds, general operating funds, correct? Or do we have to have a project?
Yes. You can request general operating funds.
Yeah.
But please, I just encourage you to be specific on what those funds are for. Just be real, again, tell your story about your need for those operating funds.
And so in the first box on the first page where it's the project cost, that would be the request for operating funds up to the 113,000.
Correct.
So that would be synonymous with project if you're requesting operating funds.
Yes.
Another question is, suppose a question is non-applicable. What do they do if every question has to be answered?
So back to what both Megan and I have said earlier, tell us why you're not able to answer the question. If it is not applicable at all, you can put NA or not applicable, but we would encourage you to let us know why you aren't able to provide that information or answer that question.
All right. The next question is, one thing that has made it difficult to limit words in the past has been the guidance that we've received that each question is entirely independent and answers to others will not be taken into account to elucidate answers to any questions. They all must stand alone. This necessitates a lot of repetition. Is this still the case?
One of the things, that's a great question. One of the things that we tried to do this year is to eliminate some of that repetition. I know there was a few questions in previous years that was asked a little bit differently in different areas. We've tried to eliminate that this year and really encourage you to build upon your application, starting with that statement of need and telling us your need, telling us your qualities to achieve that need, who was involved, what are the qualities of your board of directors. So really build on that story. So it's one thing that we tried to avoid this year was that duplication of kind of repeating information back to us.
Mm-hmm. All right, and the last question is just thinking to the future, because the end of the year is so busy for most nonprofits, has there ever been discussion about moving this to a less busy time of the year? There are other grant applications that are due in December as well. So has there been discussion about that? And
go ahead, Megan.
Well, I was going to say this is something that some conversations have been had related to the timing of the application. However, we haven't been able to resolve the timing because the application process has to go through thorough review and is scheduled for our fiscal year, which starts in July. So we'd have to be really keen on how we would work with the timing to make sure there's plenty of time for the review process. So we will continue to think through the options and implications for those, definitely.
And just to echo, certainly this year has been an extraordinary year in many ways. And I know many of you on the line have CARES Act funds and have reporting requirements coming up at the end of the year in regards to that. So we are certainly cognizant of other obligations that you have and other needs, and certainly open to have that discussion as we move forward. So just to review again, the online application is due Monday, December 21st at 4 p.m. And the Laserfish application will close at that time. Questions may be submitted to nonprofits@loudoun.gov. Questions, we will not respond to your questions through this, but the answers to the questions will be posted on the website. And we will update those as frequently as we can. And then the awards will be recommended to the board at the second meeting in April of 2021. And shortly thereafter, probably end of April, first part of May, we will get those award announcements out there. So we have sufficient time to get MOUs signed, to get your ACH account set up with the county if you haven't already, and to get you set to ready to go on July 1st. And with that, if we have any additional questions. Megan, we can't hear you.
Thank you. So we've received a number of questions in the chat that we've been able to address with the recording on. I know that some individuals feel more comfortable asking questions in person. So we can open up the lines. I will turn off the recording and we will capture those questions personally so that it can be a back and forth. So I'm going to turn the